Everyone, my name is Jonathan Bailey, and I'm going to be doing a brief overview of the Boeing 737 MAX issues that occurred and analyzing with the DIKA model. I'm not going to be going into too much detail about the crashes or the investigations. I'm actually just going to be looking at um, the root cause of the issue that was determined, which is the AOA issues that caused the Lion Air and the Ethiopian airline to crash. And just like I said, so the investigations and all that, not really going to go over, but hope you enjoy this presentation. Let's get started. So, quick brief overview. Yep, so we know two different aircraft crashes occurred. They were determined to be the root cause was AOA issues, false stall indications, which forced the nose down and made the aircraft impossible to pilot, thus crashing. And unfortunately, hundreds of people died. Investigations show the pilots were not correctly alerted that there was an AOA issue. The 737 MAX was grounded. Boeing and FAA determined the cause, which was the AOA issue, and then Boeing releases a statement on the AOA disagree alert issue, and this is the main press release or statement I'm going to be evaluating today. Just on the information, and so with that said, we will move on. So why did this happen? So there was an AOA indicator and AOA disagree alert issue. The main reason why it happened was because looking at the Boeing statement on AOA disagree alert, airspeed, attitude, altitude, vertical speed, heading, engine power settings are the primary parameters for flight crews to use for the flight crews used to safely operate an airplane during normal flight. It continues on to say that neither AOA indicator nor AOA disagree alert messages are necessary for safe operation of the airplane. So that is the key reason why this happened, was because it turns out that Boeing knew that there was an AOA issue, but in certifying aircraft, their AOA is not a critical safety of flight, so it's not necessarily considered during the certification. So this problem was not communicated to any of the customers that bought the aircraft, to include the Ethiopian or the Lion Air. So that caused these issues to occur on the aircraft, and pilots not knowing how to rectify the situation. It was determined that the night prior to the Lion Air crash, the same issue had occurred with the aircraft, thinking it was in a stall condition when it was not, and it was correcting itself. And one of the deadhead pilots, who was just catching a ride in the cockpit, noticed the issue and was able to identify that it was a malfunctioning AOA issue, and so they just disabled the AOA, and they were able to safely continue the flight, but they did not communicate this to the following aircrew or the maintenance or anybody else. So when it happened on the next flight, that experience was not there, and thus the crash had occurred. So how does this all kind of come into play with what we've learned in using the DIK model? So how it comes into play was basically, one could argue that the DIK model was used, but it wasn't used efficiently. So they used it. They went left or right. I'll explain that in a minute. But they didn't when they came to action. Instead of maybe looking at the action and thinking that it may not be the best course of action, seeing as people's lives were put into danger with this, they didn't reuse the model. They just figured, okay, it's not a safety flight issue, we're good to go. We'll fix it with a software update later. So that's the biggest issue with how the model was used. So like I said, Boeing knew that this was an issue. They had the subject matter experts that were on the program. They looked at all the raw data because they could see it. They took out, but they determined that the it was not critical for safety of flight, so that could be fixed. So they brought all their knowledge together and used, and said, okay, we just fix it with a software update later, and we'll move on. Now that would have maybe been sufficient if they would have been able to say, hey, we along with passing this over to the customer, we're going to also let them know, but that was not identified because probably it wasn't in their department, or there's with aircraft that are being built like this, there's thousands of people that are involved. So, but who wasn't involved was senior management was not involved, and senior leadership did not know about this issue until actually after the crashes had occurred, which is way too late. So that's the big links in the chain that we're missing, and that is the biggest issue with why this problem had occurred. So the major flaws. So in our textbook, it talks about too many links in the chain. Well, this is an example of insufficient chain links in the chains of communication, where if senior management would have involved, I'm sure that they would have said, hey, let's mitigate as much risk as possible. We're not going to accept this. We need to bring in an outside, someone from the outside to figure out if this is going to fly or whatnot. And they did not do that. So a table that was very interesting in our textbooks, 6.3, page 154. It goes over the properly evaluating evidence. The credibility was there. They had the subject matter experts. They were all credible. They all knew what was going on. They were masters in their areas of software engineering, so forth. But unfortunately, the information, the objectivity wasn't there. I mean, the information is clearly biased. They're like, hey, it's not a big deal. And maybe this is due to time, like some deadlines that need to be met or whatever. But the right steps were not taken. So this goes into timeliness. It was timeliness. The information was real time, so it was up to date. Everyone knew what the issue was at Boeing. The biggest issue was they just did not pass it along. And the representativeness, yes, they were all. Well, actually, no, that was missing as well, because the senior leadership was not involved. They just had the credible subject matter experts and lower level software managers, but they did not have senior leadership involved. So there was no way to get someone who had any weight behind the program to do anything. So unfortunately. So kind of how does this all apply to me? Well, I work for Boeing. I'm on strict timelines all the time. I work for a Navy customer, and I'm on a big program, and I deal with training products and services, and I have to, as a field service rep, I'm at a site where I take all the data, I collect a bunch of data on site, a bunch of information on site of what the customer wants, and I relay that back to Boeing so we could build better training products, better training material, and then I give that training to the customer. So I'm like the middleman. But how this applies to me is this model can be used in my own personal setting. So I could take the data and the information, and I can bring in the right knowledgeable experts to help build the training material, get it the most, the meat and potatoes of what really needs to be learned, and they can even teach me up on it, and we can create proper training and PowerPoints and hands-on equipment that can be utilized. And if not, we can go back to the drawing board and do it all over again. So this is kind of where I'm going to pair the two, from not going into the same slippery slope of how looking at my Boeing counterparts years ago, which is meeting locally with their subject matter experts on the program for AOA and the MCAS system. They didn't have any outside help or let anybody know. I could be more open to getting more people involved. Now, I know our textbook talks about too many chains of communication. This doesn't mean that I'm going to bring everyone in on sending and receiving emails and getting everybody involved, but I could open up and diversify my pool of individuals I go talk to, so I can get as much information as possible and bring in those knowledgeable experts so I could bring the best course of action to my manager and we can get that signed off and squared away. So it's definitely two different extremes I'm talking about, because I'm not dealing with certifying aircraft that could possibly kill hundreds of people if there are issues. However, I think it is a valid example of how this DIK model can be used in any and all situations, and in my own personal work environment. And it's a model I've already talked to my boss about using, and I think I'm excited to use it. And it's just goes to show how using the model consecutively over and over again, once you get to a certain course of action, doesn't mean you're done. You have to go back and look at the data and make sure everything is correct. So the references, everything was taken from either our textbook, Communicating for Managerial Effectiveness, or the Boeing statements on AOA Discrete Alert, or the 737 MAX updates. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I hope you all can find a way to incorporate maybe the DIK model into your daily lives, not daily work lives, and kind of see how it has it just works in multiple situations. It's not just this isn't just an aircraft based model. It's an everything model. So like I said, I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much for listening.